for this final video of this first sequence of videos, I want to show you how you can create a simple button on one form or an image which has an event hooked to it that moves to a second form. So this will give you a very simple architecture of how to move from one form to another. Each of the forms can display different information. Each of the forms can have its own activity inside that form. And this will give you the basic to the second and the most important element in allowing your user interface to be interactive. So in the current way that when we've coded, we have our button. It's very tiny on screen, I know, and we added an on-click handler, which the last video did. We added a text view, and it basically changed text inside that particular form. You'll notice over here, I'm clicking with my mouse across two files. You have a main activity and you have activity main. So you have code, Java code, corresponding to an XML user interface, right? They link together very importantly. And they link together with this bit of code, the code I didn't explain in some of the earlier videos. One of the things that the Java file, which underlies the activity, the user interface, is it has something called an onCreate method call. And what that does is it actually loads up and displays the XML file and it renders it as well. There's lots of processes inside, but you don't need to worry about this. So this block of code is very, very useful because if you run this file, the first thing it will do, if you build this class, you will run the onCreate on it. You will build the corresponding XML file. Now, that was perhaps a rather obscure explanation, but let me see if I can apply it for you. So I have one activity main, a main activity. Now what I want to do is create a second interface file, a user interface, another activity in the language of Android. What I do is I can do this anywhere I like, but I'll go to the app, right click it, and I'll go to new. Now new gives me lots of options. I can create just a separate resource file. I can create a separate Java file here somewhere. I'm sure I can. I'm just not seeing it. I can create C++ files. I can create all kinds of different things. But the really useful thing for our purposes is if you scroll down to the activity, you can create another. You look at the empty activity, which means that it will create both the Java file, which loads up that particular activity, and the activity. So if I click on empty activity, so this is my second one, it gives me a default name, main2 activity. Let's say that this is my first UI screen. Give it a random name like this. When I type the activity name in, it's changed activity _ first UI screen. It adds it to the package. The language is Java, and it says target source set. You don't have to check any of that. If I then finish that, what you will notice is that over here under Java, I have a first UI screen, and down here in my layouts, I have a blank form, a blank user interface. And inside the first UI screen for the class, I have that same block of code, which will create my activity first UI screen. So from your point of view, adding an empty activity will add both the code behind it and a place to write code behind the form and the front end of the form together. Simpler way of doing it. It's a very, very effective mechanism. So now we have a very simple thing we can do. Let's go to our layout and maybe add an image to it. Okay. Now I'm not going to put much thought into this, so do forgive me. I'm going to look at some background scenery. I don't know, let's just grab a simple image, drop an image in, let's see if it will work. Okay, yeah, it's kind of loosely popped it there. Now I'm not sure because I'm not going to fiddle with any of this. None of the constraints are set. So maybe I do need to set the constraints by doing the same thing with the dragging of this so it fits the edges. Okay, not quite sure what's going to happen. This view is not constrained horizontally at runtime. It would jump to the left unless you had a horizontal constraint. That's a user interface issue. That's a placement issue. from my point of view, as long as it displays the form, I'm okay. To guarantee that it is the right form, I'm going to just add a text view, and I'm going to hard code against everything I've been saying to you, just a simple bit of text which says, this is my second form. Okay, it won't be entirely happy with that, and because I haven't constrained it, it's going to go up to the top. Now, let's go back to my first form, and I have a button, and it's already wired into a click handler which was sitting inside main activity. There it is there. And in the previous use of it, I just used it to change text on that form. Now, there's two things. I can either change the inside of it, or I just create another one. But if I create another one, give it another name. Let's just give it another imaginative name on click handler 2. Get rid of the text inside. Okay, so now I have a second handler which is inside it. If I go back to my activity main, I should, fingers crossed, see it appear. There it is. I now have a second handler I can wire that button to. Right? So I haven't lost my previous code. I'm just adding another one. So I'm going to wire it to my second one. It's going to complain about that was a different thing. Right? Let's go back to main activity. So what code do I need inside this handler to switch the forms, to switch the activity? It all comes down to this really interesting word called intent. In order to use an intent, you have to import it, and for some reason I've done it already. But what you would write is the import statement Android content .star, which would allow you to import it. I'm going to pop it into my snippets file so you can get access to it. Go back there. Okay, so now I've got this thing called an intent. Now, what is an intent? Intent is often something you are going to do. And let's call it my intent. And my intent, I create a new intent. And what I want to do is for within this context of this particular package. So let's go package context. Let's find the right, where is it? Oops, I'm jumping all over the place. Give me a second. Package context colon. It's not happy with that. Let's have a look. What am I missing? Can't resolve package context. We'll have to double check why that's creating a minor problem for it. Hang on a second. Let's just get rid of that for the moment. What I'm actually going to try to do, let me explain the concept and then I'll code it and see, is I want to say go from this form to that form. So the first form sits and is loaded by main activity. So I'm going to go main activity dot this, comma, and the second form is going to be called first UI screen dot this. It's a peculiar syntax. It's not going to entirely be happy. And the second term is not this. The second term is class. Okay. You notice I had a problem with the term package context. It's just slotted it in. Right. So all I typed in was, let's scroll across, was my current form, my current Java file, which I'm in. So I'm in main activity. It's still not happy about something, but we'll come back to, I haven't added a semicolon right at the end of the line. Right, that should make it happy. No red lines. Good. Right, so let's just go through this again. I create an intent, a type of object called an intent. I create a new one. I go from this Java file, main activity, and I go to the class, dot class of the second one. Now, it's a peculiar syntax. You're going to repeat it a lot so you can get used to it. When you ask about the reasoning behind it, part of it is historical, part of it is logical within its own, but you can get lost in trying to understand it, why it's using class and this and so on. My suggestion is you understand how to use it and slowly start grasping why it has this peculiar approach. Then underneath it, I need to actually execute that intent, right? So I have an intent to load up a new form. That's what this top line says. Go from here to there. But this line here will say implement that intent. It's a good way of thinking about it. So the intent I want to run is my intent. And that's it. There's only 2 lines of code that you need to switch one form and another. And everything else is managed, as you can see. So shall we test it out? Let's run it and see what happens. Right, so at the moment it's just building, and Gradle being the default build environment. Okay, it's loaded up the form. And what's next? Okay, so there's my button. So the moment of truth is, if I click this, it shouldn't change the text because I'm using onClick handler 2. It should flick to my second form. See if it crashes. It didn't crash. It loaded my second form. This is my second form. But what it didn't do is display my, if you noticed, I tried to put some background image. Now that's a user interface issue. And what I would recommend is that you can spend plenty of time doing the user interface stuff. So this is a simple, repetitive mechanism of allowing you to create new forms and create a navigation structure. So you click on a button, it takes you to another screen. Click on a button, takes you to another. And you can have 2 buttons on there, one takes you one way, one takes you another. So you can map out a very complex set of pathways from any particular form in a very simple way, which is a very good and very light kind of conceptual architecture for you to create an interactive interface. I'm not going to spend any time looking at this. I think the problem with it is that the images need to be loaded in, and so in a later video we might spend some more time making sure that how do you load in new images and all the rest of that and do all that kind of stuff.